Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And it's good to see you all here today on this Memorial Day weekend. So, in recent weeks, we've been discussing a text, the Bodhikaravatara, the guidance for the Bodhisattva, or the way of the Bodhisattva. And the title of this chapter is sometimes translated as Carefulness, or conscientiousness, or attending. And it's chapter 4. It's sort of the final chapter before getting into specific discussion of each of the paramitas, or perfections. Traditionally, there are 6 such virtues that are espoused by bodhisattvas. So there's generosity, and there's morality, and patience, vigor, meditation, and wisdom. And in this text, Shantideva is discussing his view of how these can be developed. In some ways, it's a meditation by Shantideva of spiritual development, written in the form of verse, as a poem, a long poem, with many verses of 4 lines each. And this chapter on carefulness is about how to, in a sense, care for bodhicitta once it has arisen. And we talked about previously about bodhicitta being this aspiration to become awakened, to become more aware, not only for your own benefit, but for the benefit of all beings, including non-human beings, all beings, for everyone's benefit. And the archetype of the bodhisattva is just that, to become awakened for the benefit of all beings. Bodhicitta is more or less the sprout, the seed that has sprouted. And this chapter is about how to care for this sprout, to bring it to fruition. So I think in some ways, this chapter can be put in the context of a more general Buddhist principle, which is sometimes summarized: abandon, refrain, adopt, and maintain. Abandon unwholesome practices of body, speech, and mind, and refrain from taking on new ones, and adopt wholesome patterns, practices of body, speech, and mind, and maintain those that you possess. And this chapter is sort of about maintenance. One thing that is notable throughout this text and in this chapter as well is emphasis on vow or purpose or responsibility or commitment, and de-emphasis or not mentioning at all such things that are considered quite important in Western European culture, and that would be rights and prerogatives and entitlements. So emphasis on vow or commitment is a central feature of Buddhist teaching. So the first half of this chapter really talks about the sort of honoring this vow, this purpose. And the second half talks about dealing with the things that get in the way, the afflictions or obstructions. So I'll just start with reading a section from the very beginning of the chapter. The children of the conqueror, referring to the Buddha as a conqueror here, who thus have firmly grasped this bodhicitta, should never turn aside from it, strive never to transgress its disciplines. Whatever was begun without due heed, and that was not properly conceived, although a promise and a pledge were given, it is right to reconsider, shall I act or not? So Shantideva is essentially telling us that if you signed a contract to buy land in Florida at the bar last night, and upon awakening you regret that, it's reasonable to reconsider that decision. I think you have a certain number of hours to go back on it. Whatever was begun without due heed and all that was not properly conceived, although a promise and a pledge were given, it is right to reconsider, shall I act or not? Yet, what the Buddhas and their heirs have scrutinized in their great wisdom, I myself have probed and scrutinized. Why should I now procrastinate? So if it has been given due consideration, and there are models that you are following that are worthy, why should I now hesitate or procrastinate? For if I bind myself with promises but fail to carry out my words in deed, then every being will have been betrayed. What destiny must lie in store for me? He goes on a little later, elaborating on this. The appearance of the Buddhas in the world, true faith, and the attainment of a human form, an aptitude for good, all these are rare. When will they come to me again? Today, indeed, I'm hale and well. I have enough to eat and I am not in danger. But this life is fleeting, unreliable. My body is like something briefly lent. And yet the way I act is such that I shall not regain a human life, and losing this, my precious human form, my evils will be many, virtues none. Here is now my chance for wholesome deeds. But if I fail to practice virtue, what will be my lot? What shall I do? Bewildered by the sorrows of the lower realms. Now, here, Shantideva is referring to a topic in Buddhist cosmology. And just to understand where he's coming from, I'll talk about that just a bit. In Buddhist cosmology, there are 6 realms of existence that we pass through in the course of samsara, birth and death, birth and death, birth and rebirth, etc. So there are these 6 realms, and what realm we end up with, in what realm we end up in after this life, depends on our actions, our karma, our intentional actions during this life. That's the idea. And there are higher realms and there are lower realms. And the higher realms include humans, devas, and asuras. So devas are like the realm of the deva is pleasant, basically all the time. It's like just weather like today here in St. Louis all the time. So there is no, or at least not much, hardly any adversity in such an environment. And the realm of the asuras, the warriors, is one of a desire, an intense desire for power and conquest. So they're like the warlords. And of course, the human realm we're familiar with. The lower realms include pretas, or hungry ghosts, which are sometimes depicted with very narrow necks and huge stomachs. They have insatiable appetite. They are never satisfied. And then there's the animal realm, which refers to what we ordinarily consider as animals. And then there is the hell realm, where it's just unmitigated misery for an extended period of time. Not eternal, mind you, but extended. So he's talking about avoiding these lower realms in rebirth. Now, this Buddhist cosmology, I don't know how Shantideva took it or understood it. It was the lingua of the time. It was the way people talked about things, and he incorporated this in his text. Whether he took it literally or not, we don't know. Whether those in Buddha's time, how they took it. Maybe they took these realms to be just as illusory as our current realm is illusory. But in any case, the teachings of the Buddha do not rely on belief in this cosmology. At least that's my opinion about it. Some people might argue with that. The teachings of the Buddha really start with suffering and proceed to measures to relieve suffering. And the Buddha often said that his mission in teaching was to teach about suffering and the relief of suffering. And I think suffering is something we can all understand or experience, especially the word dukkha, which is translated as suffering, takes in lots of things, which would include just sort of global anxiety and any kind of fear, discomfort. Now, the human realm in Buddhist cosmology is considered optimal for awakening because there is a right balance of adversity and awareness, so that it's possible to, through the stimulation of this adversity, to develop awareness and awakening. Whereas in the lower realms, like for instance in the hell realm, there's so much adversity, so much misery that you just really can't move. You can't think. You can't. Awareness is not an option. And within this cosmology, they viewed animals as being kind of instinctual, not really having much in the way of awareness, consciousness, that sort of thing, which we would might not agree with now. But in any case, that's where Shantideva was coming from in talking about the lower realms. I think we could all agree that our actions during this lifetime have consequences, and in fact, long-term consequences, and in fact, consequences that will continue beyond our earthly existence. So in this first couple readings, Shantideva is talking about the opportunity that we currently have and the importance of honoring that and using it. In the latter half of this chapter, he's sort of gets into a soliloquy about the things that get in the way, the things that get in the way of awakening, which he clumps together as afflictions. And in this section, he starts off, he says, if it's as if by chance that I have gained this state so hard to find, wherein to help myself, he's talking about this human state, human realm, if now, while having such discernment, I am once again consigned to hell, I am as if benumbed by sorcery, as if reduced to total mindlessness. I do not know what dulls my wits. Oh, what is it that has me in its grip? Anger, lust, these enemies of mine are limbless and devoid of faculties. They have no bravery, no cleverness. How then have they reduced me to such slavery? They dwell within my mind and at their pleasure injure me. All this I suffer meekly, unresenting, thus my abject patience all displaced. There's another translation of that particular verse. Lodged within my own mind, it is me they strike down, themselves unshaken. Yet I do not hail with rage at this. Oh, such ill-placed forbearance. Why am I putting up with it? If all the gods and demigods besides came against me as my foes, they would be powerless to throw me down to fires of hell of unrelenting pain. And yet, the mighty fiend of my afflictions flings me in an instant headlong down to where the mighty Lord of mountains would be burned, its very ashes all consumed. The mailman there. To where the mighty Lord of mountains would be burned, its very ashes consumed. He's talking about Mount Sumeru, which is considered in again, in Buddhist cosmology, to be the sort of the center of the universe, and it's an enormous mountain. And he's saying that the place that he's being thrust into is so hot that it could consume Mount Sumeru. O my enemy, afflictive passion, endless and beginningless companion, no other enemy indeed is able to endure so long. Again, referring to anger and lust, or hate and greed. They shall be my all-consuming passion. So this shall be my all-consuming passion, he goes on later. This shall be my all-consuming passion. Filled with rancor, I will wage my war against these defilements. Defilements of this kind will halt defilement, and for this reason it shall not be spurned. So that's a little confusing, but he's saying that this passion, ordinarily, passions are considered something to be controlled. But in this case, the passion to eliminate his afflictions is a passion that he's going to encourage. Better if I perish in the fire, better that my head be severed from my body, than ever I should serve or reverence my mortal enemies' defiled emotions. Common foes, when driven from the state, retreat and base themselves in other lands, and muster all their strength the better to return. But enemy afflictions are without such stratagems. Miserable defilements scattered by the eye of wisdom, where will you now run? When driven from my mind, whence would you return to do me harm? But oh, my mind is feeble, I am indolent. Defilements are not in the object, not within the faculties, nor somewhere in between. And if not elsewhere, where is their abode, whence they inflict their havoc on the world? They are simple mirages, and so take heart. Banish all your fear, and strive to know their nature. Why suffer needlessly the pains of hell? This is how I should reflect and labor, that I might apply the precepts thus set forth. So in the latter part of the chapter, he uses kind of a warrior metaphor to describe dealing with afflictions of greed, anger, hatred. In the next chapter, he's going to be, again, going into one of the paramitas, and essentially will be telling us that awareness is our friend, and discusses the cultivation of awareness. So this may seem kind of distant in a way, but I think these afflictions, once one becomes attuned to them, once one becomes attuned to unhealthy, unwholesome desires, to anger, irritation, to hatred, to animosity. Once one becomes attuned to these, they do crop up. And where do they come from? As he points out, they have no real substance. But why can they wreak such havoc, as he says? So recognizing the substanceness of these afflictions is an encouragement that he offers at the end, and a reminder to us that they can be dealt with. We are not victims here. Whether you like the warrior metaphor or not, I think is a question that could be discussed. I think clearly Shantideva is highly attuned to what's going on in his inner life. And thus, it sounds like he's got, just burdened by many, many afflictions. But I think actually, very likely, he was a fairly ordinary individual who was just sensitive to what was arising in his mind and how he needed to take care of it, take care of mind. In order to guard bodhicitta, the aspiration to awaken for the benefit not only of oneself, but for all beings. So I think I'll stop there, and I would be interested in, well, first of all, how what you think about this warrior metaphor, and if you have some other way that you think about dealing with unwholesome states, unwholesome afflictions. And also practices that may help guard this aspiration that brought you here in the first place. How do we guard it? How do we care for it? How do we nurture it? How do we bring it to fruition? Thank you very much for listening today. And we'll go into groups, and I will return later.